Okay, so welcome everybody to tonight's very first Home Ed webinar, and we are very, very excited to be joined by Emily Currell from Curiosity-Led Learning. I know that a lot of our families in the Academy do home educate already, and there are others that are seriously contemplating it because of what is happening in our school. So I've invited Emma to come in just to share a little bit of insight into how she home eds and why. So she's put together a presentation for you just to share some of her experiences. You would have seen some of this already on her Facebook page. If you don't follow it yet already, I strongly recommend that you do because she is absolutely amazing. So Emma, I'm going to hand it over to you if that's okay.
Fantastic. So I just do my first slide. So I wanted to just chat about us first. So who am I? Who are we? How do we get to home edging? And why, kind of thing. So if I just start with the first slide. So I've got about us and our home education background and why do we home ed? And we've got 4 children. My background is I've got 4 children. 3 of my children are dyslexic. 2 of them are diagnosed. 1 is going in for an assessment. My 4th child, she's 3, so we don't really kind of know about her. But my eldest son started nursery school and he was a bright, happy boy, went into school, and each year he became less of who he should have been and less of who he was actually. And he just became very anxious, very worried. He wouldn't try things. And we got to about year 5, and in the school that we were in, they were putting such pressure on him, despite being dyslexic, that we just found him crying at the kitchen table one evening, and he couldn't really tell us why. And we moved him from that school to another school, to a state school, and he had a great final year there. We tried home edding with him, but he's a little different kettle of fish to my other 3 children, and he was very desperate to get back to being in a group of friends constantly and learning in that sort of environment. But with my second son, he's dyslexic, but he also has other issues. So he has dyspraxia, he has auditory processing problems he's been assessed for, and also sensory processing issues as well. He's also got dysgraphia as well. So not only was he struggling with the dyslexia problems at school, he was also struggling with the physical problems as well. Like he would sit at this table and just be in pain. And then he would slump, and it sort of finally culminated with him excessively licking not just his lips, but around the outside of his mouth. And it got so red, it then became an open sore. And I was sat in a meeting with the school sort of complaining about things not moving on and H just sitting in the classroom doing absolutely nothing and nobody helping him. And they were kind of excited that his mouth was sort of an open sore and said, brilliant, we can refer because he's almost self-harming. And my husband and I came out of that meeting going, this is awful that our son has had to basically self-harm before anybody gives him any help or he gets put on any waiting list. And it wasn't even to get help, as you guys all know, it was to be put on a waiting list to be assessed whether he needed any help. So my husband said to me, well, you're a teacher, why don't we just home ed him? And I must admit, I'd never been on my wavelength at all. I'd never thought about it. I'd had a 4-year teacher training degree. I'd done a 1-year probationary year, and then I taught for 4 years, and I'd never heard of home education. So for me, it wasn't even on my radar. And I didn't really know whether we could do it. And it's the same common problems that everybody has when they think about home education. Can I do it? And actually, my husband said, well, we can't really do worse than what's being done at school, because he's anxious, he wasn't eating, he was very thin. And actually, when you put it like that, we start from a point of view that we love him, and school didn't even have that as a starting point. And they didn't really have a point of caring about him, because the way they sort of left him to get on with things kind of demonstrated that too. So we felt that H was, in fact, being managed out of school. Looking back at the time, it was just very stressful, very, very stressful. But now we look back and we realise that the school basically didn't want him there. And so that's why we took him out. And so we wrote our deregistration letter and we handed it in. And that was that. That was nearly 2.5 years ago. And I have to say, I think it was possibly the best thing that we could have done for him, which was great. So I'm looking at the bottom of the slide, and I did put in, are we anti-school? Because the sort of idea that home educators don't like school and are anti-curriculum and anti-everything. And obviously I'm not, because I'm a teacher. I am anti what's going on in primary schools at the moment. So the curriculum is just too packed, and it's too much too soon. And then you add in children like my children, who need time to develop. You give them an idea, and then you can't move him on, either of them actually, you can't move them on very quickly, and they need time to think about it. And the curriculum is so perpetual that it just moves on and moves on and moves on, and it's leaving people like my H and my T behind, and that's not very fair, I'm afraid. So I'm not anti-school at all. Our elder son goes to a school and has always chosen to go to school. Like I said, he tried home ed for a few weeks but wanted to go back to school. He chose the school he goes to. They have been incredibly supportive. I was saying to Sarah earlier on that he had, for his first year that he was there in year 7, he had an hour's extra English session per day. So that's 5 hours a week extra to his English lessons. So not all schools are bad. And we hope that H, if he's able to, can go into that school in year 7. We're kind of skipping the entire of primary school, actually, because I'm looking at the curriculum as a teacher and going, I used to teach that. So I used to teach that in year 4, and it's now being taught in year 3. Coupled with dyslexia and all the other SEN issues as well, I cannot see how children can't be anything less than stressed. And I can't put my children back into that situation. So for us, they're not going to go back into school, really. So with our elder son showing that, a school, and so see, he's at school and is thriving, so it shows that a child in the right school with the right support can be really happy, actually. So I wanted to talk about the law and home education. So what does the law say? Because the first thing I get is about socialisation, but don't mix with anybody. But I also get, are we allowed to do that? Is it legal? So I wanted to just check out with everybody. I know we've got some home educators probably watching who know about the law, and it is absolutely legal to home ed your children. I've actually found the part of the law as well that I could read out. So Section 7 of the Education Act in 1996 states that parents need to ensure their child of compulsory school age receives a suitable education. And this could be at school or otherwise. And the word otherwise indicates that education doesn't necessarily have to be at school. So that's the sort of special word that enables us to home educate. And compulsory school age is the term after the child turns 5. So up until then, we can educate if we want to, or we can just have a childhood, or they can go to nursery or whatever. But the term after is the term that we are supposed to be providing a suitable education. Can you home educate SEND children? And the answer is yes, you can. But children who are SEND or have an EHCP can be home educated at home. However, if this EHCP names a school but the child is home educated, the LA must be satisfied that the education is suitable and will review the statement or plan annually. So you will have contact if you have that the care plan in place. How is this applied in practice? So to home ed your child, if they are younger than compulsory school age, so I've got a 3-year-old at the moment, she's very soon to be 4. I'm supposed to have applied for a school place for her so she can start in September. But because our plan now is that she is going to be home educated, I don't have to do anything. So I don't have to inform people that she's not going to be home educated, and I don't have to inform anyone to say that she is. I literally just do nothing. But if my child is already in school already, which my boys were, I have to hand in a deregistration letter informing my intention to remove my child from the school and to deregister them in order to home educate them. And it's quite simple, actually. There are templates online that you can find if you wanted to do that. So we wrote a letter after that awful meeting. We wrote our deregistration letter. And we handed it in, and we didn't go back again. So you don't have to have a meeting, you don't have to have a discussion with school, and you don't have to ask their permission unless they have that care plan. So you don't have to ask permission, so we didn't. We handed in H's registration letter, and then he left, and that was that. One tip I've written down is just make sure you've collected all of your child's belongings if you don't want to go back to the school, because it might make it slightly difficult if you did. T school was slightly different. We gave him the opportunity of home edding because we did a few weeks with H, I have to say H was quite battered and bruised at that point, and there is such a thing as deschooling, where it's a train of thought that for every year your child has been in school, that you should perhaps have a month reflecting those years, so 4 years in school, 4 months of deschooling, where you just let them rest and actually recuperate and kind of, I don't know, regroup as a family, actually, because most home editors who come out of school come out because they've had an awful experience or something's not going right. So you kind of need that time to just heal, and that is a word I would use. Unfortunately, I didn't know about deschooling when H came out, and to be honest, I think that would have worked for him. I tried to go straight back into not necessarily 6 hours of learning, but to keep up learning, and I don't think that was the right thing to do, and I would advise anybody to de-school, to give you time as a family to heal, regroup, and actually just see your child smile again. I've got photos I took at that time, because I take a lot of photos just to document what we do. But also it is good to take those photos to look back and see how things have changed. And I can see that he was still very unhappy there, and I wasn't helping him at that point. So I would say deschooling is absolutely great. We got to Christmas, so he was out in October, and then we got to Christmas, and T was saying a few things. Now, he's my 8-year-old, so H is my 10-year-old. So T was saying to me, oh, you know, I quite like the idea of home educating with you and H, and it's like, can I do that? And it wasn't something I thought of. I suddenly thought, well, we've got H out of school, he's not in school, the mouth was healing, he was a bit less stressed, and I hadn't actually thought of what we would do with T. He would just go to school, I thought. I found out that he was selective mute at school by the deputy head teacher, saying to me that he wouldn't read to anybody apart from his teacher, who was the deputy head, and that they were setting up a nurture group for him. And again, I was astonished. My loud, crazy boy who flings himself off everything at home, and, you know, he's rolling on the floor, playing with the dog, shouting, and then to hear that he was a selective mute in school. And again, a husband and I had to have big chats, and we said to T, if you want to home ed as well with H, then that's what we can do. And we gave him the Christmas holidays to have a think about it. And he said that actually he would. So again, we emailed the school, and actually we did leave his PE kit there, and we never collected it. But we never heard from the school. We didn't get anything back from that school. H's school, funnily enough, the head teacher gave us a great email saying, I am very sorry that my school couldn't, or we couldn't accommodate H's needs. And not as a consequence of H, but I think as a consequence of lots of things, he then told us that he was resigning and he was leaving education, and he actually didn't have a job to go to. So for me, that was a huge, that was a huge thing to hear that from a head teacher. I think it's as near as I was going to get to, I totally understand why you're going, and I'm really very sorry that it's got to this. So I've also, so I've just covered how it's applied in practice. Will the law change? Now, I've put this just because there is a private members bill going, being heard at the moment by Lord Soley. He's brought this private members bill, and it's a bill to make provision for local authorities to monitor the educational, physical and emotional development of children receiving elective home education. And it's on its second reading, but to be honest, even if it does get put through, I can't see how it can be implemented. So, because there are no current training courses for local education authority staff to go on to be a qualified assessor of provision for home educators. And there's no funding for schools, as we know, and each year goes by, the funding is getting less and less and less. So I can't see how they are going to fund assessing home editors every year and spending the time that's needed to do that. I cannot see where that money is going to come from and how they're going to implement it. So as a home educator, I'm not overly worried about that at the moment. I know some other home educators are, and I know it is worrying that it's sort of grumbling around in the background, but I cannot see how on earth they can fund it. I really can't. And it's interesting as well that people are very upset about this possible law change, and there's sort of a train of thought that the government has no interest in our children under compulsory age, and so there's no compulsory monitoring in place. So we have our children to ourselves for 5 years, and no one says, I haven't seen your child, therefore there must be bad things happening, so I need to see you. And it's strange that as soon as a child turns compulsory school age, that suddenly the government is wanting to know all about them. So that's a bit strange as well, and that's quite a hard thing to sort of get over. So I'm going to move on my slide now to the different styles of home education. And again, it's quite a big subject to talk about in quite a small amount of time. So I've just sort of bullet pointed it too, the different ways to look to how to home ed. And there's a great website if you wanted to have a look at more information about home education called educationalfreedom.org, and it's actually run by a couple of ladies in my home ed community, and it's a very great website. It's full of information, and they describe it as the physical way you structure your day and the method or philosophy that you use to fill your time. So I said, I think we can simplify this as, what do you do all day and why? So there are lots of labels used in the home ed community, just as there are with anything to do with children, whether you're a baby-led weaner or whether you're a cloth-wearing nappy person, or whether you're, we do like to label and put people in boxes, but it's an interesting one. So there is structured, semi-structured, unstructured, unschooling, or autonomous learning. So structured looks a bit like school at home. So the learning is planned and it's delivered in a structured type way. So it could be sitting around the kitchen table or something like that, doing traditional school-like work. Semi-structured, perhaps some of the day is structured, or some of the learning is structured. So, or it can be taught in a structured way. So some semi-structured, some of the learning happens like that. Unschooling is following the child's lead rather than planning specifically to teach them. And I've put here, not every home eder likes a label. So what do we do as a family? What do we do? Well, as I said, when we first came out, I didn't know much about home eding at all. Being a teacher and home eding are two completely different things, I've learned. So I was trying to provide a school type environment because that's what I thought I needed to do. And actually looking back, it certainly wasn't what H needed at all. And I wish I hadn't done that. I wish we'd had time out. So we've tried various different things actually. And what we do at the moment, as you know, my guys are dyslexic, and H also has dyspraxia and dysgraphia and very probably auditory processing disorder and sensory processing disorder. T is also dyslexic. He has sensory needs too, but at the other end of the spectrum to H, which can give T raise ADHD-like symptoms, so he can be completely bouncing off the walls, but he's seeking sensory input. It's not really ADHD, so the two are completely different. Again, I'm not the fountain of all knowledge of all of this because we're just learning at the moment, because T has turned back into T since coming out of school, and he's turned back in, and we have noticed an increase in this energy level, so we're still trying to work out what it is. But T needs to move, and he needs regular changes of pace, and he needs his vestibular system given a thorough good workout in order for him to be able to concentrate. So he needs to hang off stuff, bounce off stuff, make stuff move. Spinning is his thing as well. That's very interesting because I know it is an autistic trait, but he is Mr. Spin. He just spins all the time. And it's something that he needs to do. Even when we're out on a walk, he's not spinning, he's rolling down the hill, which is stimulating the vestibular system, so all of his physicalness that he needs, but it's still spinning. Because of this, we have actually a very practical and hands-on approach to their learning. So we're out quite a lot. We're out and about in the environment doing stuff. So that's great for T's physical needs that he has. We have a practical session. So what I've done is I've set up a community, a home ed community called Curiosity-Led Learning. And what I do is I plan trips for the wider community, because my boys still like learning in a collaborative environment. So they don't like just sitting at the kitchen table with just each other. Quite honestly, they get bored of each other. They like learning with their friends. They like the idea of learning in a school-like way. And I mean school-like as in collaborative learning, a group of children learning at the same time. So I plan lots of trips out and visits, and then what I do is the teacher in me can't resist planning some workshops that are connected to the learning that we've done. So for example, last week we went to our local train museum to do an air raid, an evacuee workshop. In the previous weeks that we'd used some Second World War artefacts such as ration books. I've got some ration books in my family, so ration books and identity cards. We looked at medals and a gas mask, and we got all of that out. We had some friends who came around and did it with us. And we're also now going to do a month of rations, so we're going to live on rations. And so we're very, very practical, and we do a lot with other people as well. This is to help them write about things, should they need to write about, but also talk about things, develop their vocabularies. So I don't just stand, like I would do as a teacher, I don't just stand and sort of talk at them. We go out and we visit and we talk and we discuss, and that's how we get our vocabulary out. But as the boys have got older, we have introduced some structure. So I'm not saying that all structure is bad, but we have introduced structure. So we've got structure in maths, and we've got structure in science, and we are more structured in our learning in the morning. So we tend to sit down and try and do our maths in the morning, and then anything else that we need to do. And then everything else just sort of comes out of their, I don't know, we're quite autonomous and child-led in that respect. For example, I've got a friend who's just dropped down some wonderful beads and insects, all in these wonderful sort of paperweight, massive blocks of plastic. And the boys are just so taken this. So we're now linking this to our key characteristics of animals, and we're linking it to that. So you get quite good at sort of saying, well, we can make a connection with this with science, or with this with history, or with this with English. And it's about, for us, making connections to things. So we are different to school in that we don't just do maths and English and science and history and French all in one day. We may spend 4 days on one subject. And that, for my dyslexic guys, I find is great, because they're making connections and they're getting deeper into their learning and they remember it more. I'm finding their memories are improving, which is really good. And also there's no stress of a bell going, and there's no stress of, oh, hang on, I haven't finished my writing. And so we just go, okay, fair enough, we'll pack it away and then we'll get it out after lunch and you can carry it on. And I'm finding they are happier to learn because they are given the chance and the time to learn, rather than it's all about getting it down on paper and then going to the next lesson. And we're also very physical in what we do, because his occupational therapist, because of his dyspraxia, said he needs to be strong, H. And H took this and ran with it, literally. And he was sort of, I'm going to be a strong H. And that's because when he was in school, he was leaning on things, his core was terrible, and his posture, and he was in quite a lot of pain. So we spent the first year learning to climb, we skied, we ran, we swam, we sailed. And I had a theory that we used to call big muscles, small muscles, that if he could control his bigger muscles better, that maybe his fine motor skills might improve. That's still ongoing, but we have seen improvement, and he's a lot happy about himself. As well as becoming stronger, the boys are more resilient, and that's one thing that as a dyslexic I found that my eldest dyslexic chap, bless him, wasn't resilient, because he was so used to failing that he didn't want to try anything, because what's the point, because I'm going to fail anyway. And H was beginning to be the same. And we've had this year of trying, or sort of a couple of years ago, our first home ed year, we had this year of just trying new things. And our motto is, we're just going to try it. And if we don't like it, we don't have to do it. No one is going to tell us off. And I think as a consequence, both boys, both T and H, are much better at dealing with failure. They can cope with it, they can pick themselves off, and they can have another go. And I think it's also in that supportive environment that we constantly say, it doesn't matter, it's okay, you're only a child, nothing bad's going to happen. What does a day look like for us? I put this is really interesting. So there is no typical day, I have to say. So this month, I've made a list. We are off to the Houses of Parliament, the Albert Hall, and the Big Bang Science Fair in Birmingham. I plan follow-up sessions, like I've said. So we've got collaborative learning experience with a debating session. So the group that's coming with us, there's going to be 30 of us going to the Albert Hall. Sorry, not the Albert Hall, the Houses of Parliament. So there's 30 of us going. And then after that, that's a law and debating workshop that we're going to do, plus a tour. And then I've planned a debate session with the children. So they're all going to come together, and we're going to discuss contentious issues, and we're going to debate it. And then the week after that, I've planned a persuasive writing session. So we're then going to use the sort of verbal work that we've done already, and then try and use that to then do some writing. And again, with my guys, because I let anybody come to my sessions. You don't have to be wonderful at writing. You don't have to do anything at all. I will scribe for them. Other children will scribe for them. We can video, we can record, we can type. You can do whatever you want. You can draw pictures if you want. There is no strict way of doing your work when you come to one of my sessions. And the boys know this. And actually, I think H tries to write more because there's less pressure. And the other day, I mean, he wrote 2 pages of A4. He just typed out 2 pages of A4. And I have to say, he's never done this before. So this was a bit of a breakthrough. He's discovered Percy Jackson books, or his brothers who he worships. And he wrote a story, an extra story, like a fan story about Percy Jackson. And he just typed it out. And he would never have done that 2 years ago, because anything to do with a pencil or writing was just so scary and so awful. So we still have, on top of that, we're going to be learning to knit as part of our Make, Do and Mend campaign. And that's on top of a monthly book club that I run so we have children come to our house, and we have recorder and piano, swimming lessons, we dance, and we also do all the other subjects as well. So there's a lot going on. And the one thing I've learned with home ed is if there's nothing that you see that your child wants to do, if your child says, I really want to learn to, knit, and there's no club, then you can start one. And that's what's really great about home ed, that you've got that freedom to start things that suit your child and follow your child's interests, which is really great. So if I move on to common questions, we're always, as home educators, because obviously we're out during the day, and if I'm buying things in a shop, I quite often get, why aren't they in school? Oh, no school today? So I'm quite happy to discuss it, because I believe that if I talk about it with anybody, then I'm just not educating the world, but I'm just sort of letting them know that home ed is an opportunity and it's available to everybody as well. So, but don't they get lonely? There is always the socialisation questions, and anybody who's home eders who's watching this will go, yes, there's always the socialisation question, okay? But we are so busy, it's unbelievable. We're hardly ever in. And last year, we set up groups in our house, and we had so many people around. So every day we were quick, tidy up the house, we got people around for recorder, or we got people around to a Play-Doh club or painting, and we had a Starts With a Story book where I planned a younger child's, for Florrie actually, for my little daughter, a younger child's session. So we had a story, and then we did a craft activity related to the story. So we have play dates, we have the collaborative learning sessions, which I was talking about, we have trips, and also other home ed community events. So there are other home ed communities that and organisations that join. We've got a lovely one called Shed, and that's Swindon Home Edders, and that's how we got to meet other home edders initially. So it was great. Some of the events are weekly, some are bi-weekly, and one thing I've noticed is that more that parents have set groups up, other people have set, so it's sort of empowered everybody to go, oh yeah, I can do it, I can run a group. So there's chess clubs, there's Minecraft clubs, there's trampolining this, there's let's go for a walk, there's forest schools, there's so many things to do. We could do something literally every hour of every day where we are, so we're very lucky. And so I don't worry about the socialisation at all, because my kids have made their home ed friends and they are absolutely loving it. So it's really good. You do have to be proactive. It's not going to come knocking on your door. You have to go out. You have to invite people in. So that can be difficult if you're not very confident, but I think once people get into the swing of it, it's all right. So question 2 is, do you have to be a teacher? Absolutely not. You do not have to be a teacher. There has never been so much online resources plus trips out, etc. You can type in any subject you want to learn about, and videos will come up and worksheets will come up. Yes, there's varying degrees of quality, and quite honestly, you do have to pay a little bit, I would say, to get the good quality things, but you don't have to. You can produce your own material. So if you're confident, great. If you're confident in a certain area but you need help in others, then you could always go and find that help. My thing would be, you just need to be aware that you don't know everything. I don't know everything, and happy to go find out. And quite often the boys will ask me a question, why is the sky blue? I don't know, but let's go find out. And actually I show them by modelling how to learn, how to find stuff out, and also that it's quite exciting for me to learn why is the sky blue too. So I quite like it, actually. And actually, I was talking about it with my husband earlier on, and he said more and more institutions are becoming more aware of home editors and are now offering tailor-made sessions. So, for example, we've got a local science museum type, science technology engineering museum, and they didn't offer home ed sessions, but they do now. And actually, if they don't offer something, phone them up. Say, we're a group, we can get 5 of us, 10 of us, 15 of us together. Could you offer a group for us? So my thing is just be proactive, to be honest. Don't worry about the word no. Don't worry about, no, we don't do this. Okay, move on, let's find something else. Do you get funding? No, we don't. That's a bit of a bone of contention, really, isn't it? I feel I save the government by not sending my 4 children to school, and the money that we pay in tax for them to go to school would be lovely to have back. It would even be lovely for those home editors whose children home ed throughout and want to access qualifications. They have to pay for the qualifications, unfortunately, the exam entrance fee, which I think is a bit wrong. I think that the government should pay for those. Hopefully that will change, but I don't know really. So how do you know what they need to know, or how do you know what they need to learn? And again, with home ed, it's not so much as what they need to learn, but often what they'd like to learn. So if you're autonomous or child-led and you're following your child, it's about what your child wants to learn. If you're wanting to follow a curriculum, which is nothing wrong with that, because we follow a curriculum for maths, there's so much available online. You can type in national curriculum and up it comes. You can take bits of the curriculum you think, actually, that's quite interesting, but we're going to leave that. A lot of the English stuff I'm leaving in primary because it's just not relevant to my boys. And I have to say, they don't do spelling tests because they're just so stressful and quite frankly pointless, I think. So if you're sitting there and you're thinking, I'd really quite like to home ed, but I have no idea where to start, where do you start? My advice would be, if you're thinking about home edding, is there's a great website called, I've mentioned it before, Educational Freedom, or there's another one called Ed Yourself. And so if you can type them into, also if you go to Facebook and you type in the name of where you live, and so you could say Derbyshire Home Ed, and if you type that in, some groups will come up. Join those groups, make contact. They may ask you questions because some of them are quite closed groups. It is quite a closed community. And so you answer the questions, and a lot of them, our home ed group is quite happy to have people in who are thinking about home ed, who want to come along to events and just to see what it's like. They're quite friendly in that respect. And what you'll find is that if you do home ed, you'll get to know somebody who then knows somebody who then runs a group or runs a ballet group or runs a this group or whatever. So join that big group initially, and then you might find those splinter groups. I think it's quite easy. My advice would be, if you're still in school, go along in, because we don't tend to stick to term time. So I stick to term times with my piano teaching and my music teaching because my elder boy comes home. But quite a lot of home editors don't even think about term times. So the groups are still going. So you could go along to a group in a holiday session, such as something like the summer holidays, the long summer holidays. Try it out. Go a couple of times if it's a social group, because ours works every other Thursday. So you could go along and try it out, see what you think. And and just make contacts really, and get a feel before you go. If you're not in school yet, it's exactly the same thing. Just join the groups and see what you think. If you're in school and you want to leave, you do need to deregister your child. You will have to write that formal letter to say that you're removing your child. And the template letters can be found on Educational Freedom. So even if you think, I just don't know what to write, there are template letters available for you. So if I move on, what does the future hold for us? Different paths for different children. I've got 4 completely individually different children. I've got one who's totally can't stand any noise and smells and labels and all that stuff, and I've got the other one who is bouncing off the walls. I've got one who is very, very physically not able. Flo is following along following along the same lines as H with dyspraxia, so we're having to work with her. And then I've got Tobes T, who's just climbing every tree that you could do. So they are so different. So we've decided that we're just going to see where we are. We're not planning, but we have a rough plan. The boys' experience of primary school means that we're not going to put F into school. We don't want her into school at all. Because quite frankly, there was a point where I had 21 reports for my 3 boys, and not one of them was a positive report. And I still find that quite upsetting now, that everything was, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do this. And quite honestly, I don't need to put my 4th child in to be told what they can't do. I know that she has a higher chance because of her brothers, because of her father, her grandfather. Dyslexia is in my family. I know that she has a higher chance of having it. She's already got some physical issues that, just like her brother H. And quite honestly, I don't need to be told that she can't do things. So she's not going to go to school. H and T want to go back into school following their older brother. And I'm absolutely happy for them to go. Like I said at the start, I'm not anti-school. I'm anti the right child in the wrong school. And so we're happy for them to have a go at the secondary level. So that's year 7. The home ed door is always open to them. And we're absolutely fine for either of them to learn at home again if they need to. So qualification, school versus home education. You can still study for qualifications whilst being totally home eded. You can access, our local college does a 14 from age 14 session, so you can go in from 14, and that suits some children because they're not children, they don't have to wear uniform, they go in for their lessons and come home like they would at a proper college. I don't mean to sound that patronising, but I couldn't think of a different way of saying it. So they are treated older than their peers, and that suits some children. So our eldest will do his qualifications at school. H may try school, it may not work for him, he may become anxious again and we have to take him out, but you can still access the qualifications. So we're absolutely fine if they want to do that. Our eldest son's thriving, and so I've just said, the right school with the right support, they can do very well. So my last slide, I think that is my last slide, the additional benefits of home ed. So for us, the reduction of stress, that's going to be quite an obvious one. We didn't realise until we stopped being stressed just how stressed as a family we were. And we were incredibly stressed. My husband and I were stressed as a marriage because all we kept doing was fighting for the children. We were becoming very, very tired, quite honestly, tired of fighting everybody, tired of trying to convince everybody that our child, he's dyslexic, he's not stupid, he's not silly, he just can't access your curriculum, and if you help him then he can show you what he can do and how clever he is. And so taking him out reduced the stress on H, so he stopped licking his lips, and he had another tick as well when he was very stressed that he'd do things with his eyes, and his stress reduced. But we didn't think that out. We didn't even take into consideration because it was just normal life. Our stress dramatically decreased. And as a family, we became happier, which was so much better. I've put our children are allowed to be children. So T still plays with his teddies. He's 8, going to be 9 this year, but he's a very young 9-year-old or very young 8-year-old. And he's always been young for his years. And I did feel that school was trying to push him on to be an older boy, and his peers, however lovely they were older than him. So he wasn't allowed to be who he was supposed to be and is supposed to be. And he still plays with his teddies now. He still loves drawing. He still loves making all the little young children things he likes to do. And actually, I don't want him to grow up too fast. Sorry, I don't want to grow him up, but I don't want him to grow up too fast. They have time to develop. And this goes back to the time in the classroom that they didn't get, where they needed to think about an idea. They needed time for that idea to sink in, to grow, to perhaps ask another question. And they didn't have that. So they have time to mentally develop as well as be a child for a longer time. They're able to fail and be supported. Now that sounds a strange thing to say. Well, we can fail, but we can be supported. But actually part of life is failing. It's not just I need them to constantly work and succeed. So they don't need to be the best at everything. But they need to be able to know that it's okay to fail, and we will support them, and we do. And as a consequence, because they know that they're supported and it's a loving environment, when they do find things hard, they are more likely now to try things because they haven't got a group of children laughing at them because they can't write or they can't read or they can't work out what they're supposed to be doing, or they've forgotten, they've walked over to get their pencil sharpened and can't remember what they were doing there, which is what my eldest used to be like. And because of that, they're more resilient in their learning. I have mentioned it before, but it's a huge buzzword and it's a hugely important thing to be resilient as a person and resilient in your learning how to learn and learning what to do when you can't do the learning you thought you were going to do. So, and that's one thing I've noticed with them, that they are so much more resilient, which is great. They're able to take on new learning when they're able to, rather than year 4, you have to do what this says in this curriculum. So, for example, H had such huge holes in his maths work. I likened it to a brick wall that he had. Each year there was another layer of the brick, but he had holes, so it was very unsteady. So we spent quite a lot of time going over everything and relearning things. And so, for example, he's on year 4 maths, just about to come to the end of halfway through year 4. So he is half a year behind, whereas T is up with his peers. But it's what H needs. He doesn't need to be doing stuff that he can't kind of compute at the moment. And also we're able to follow their outside interests much more easily. So if they're excited about these insects in these plastic things, we can then go, that's fine, we can actually go off and have a learn and have a think about that. Whereas if they were in school, it would be, that's great, let's put them away, let's move on. So we are very lucky in that respect. So I think I've finished now, and if anyone's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Emma. That was amazing. Thank you. We do have one question that's come in already, and lady's asking, I'm looking into home ed as I don't believe my child is reaching their full potential at school. Home ed as I don't believe my child has reached. Oh, wait a minute. Let me just see if the rest of that question is there. I think I might have missed off the end of it. Oh, there we go. Yeah. I was looking at home ed as I don't believe my child is reaching their full potential at school. What level of planning and record keeping is involved? How do they take formal exams if they want to attend higher education, i.e. university?
So record keeping, monitoring, you don't have to keep any records at all. And what I do is I set up my Facebook page initially as a way of recording what we do. So I take photographs and I used to comment. And quite a lot of home editors have a closed Facebook group. They don't share with anybody. So they can share perhaps with their partner, or they can share with anybody that need to. And like I said, you can look back and see progress as well. So it's also for us, not just for monitoring. So you can do that. You can write notes. You literally don't have to keep anything, but I do, because I think it's nice to see, you know, with Facebook, when you get that sort of, oh, this year, you know, a year ago again, you were doing this. I like that because I can see that there's progress. So you don't have to keep anything. If you want to take exams, you can still access exams as an external candidate. So you can enter yourself, you can enter your child an external candidate. You just need to find a centre that takes external candidates. But you do have to pay for the exams yourself, which if they're taking 8 to 10 exams can be quite expensive. I would hope that the government would change and actually fund that part of home education. Or you can perhaps access some colleges, our local colleges does a pre-16 course starting at 14. So you can access qualifications then. So you can follow the GCSE course and they will pay for the exams as well.
So one of the issues that we've come across, and I have, like I was saying, this is the first home ed section. We plan on doing lots of different topics focusing on home education, but one of the aspects I want to cover is exam access arrangements for home education families, because obviously you have to pay and find an assessor that does access arrangements, that has a relationship with the exam centre that you're going to use. But one of the requirements of JCQ is obviously evidence of need.
Yes.
You have to get evidence that these adjustments are part of their usual way of working. So I feel there's a lot of barriers for home ed families. And as you said, it's unfair, because what you're doing at home, these children, every child has a right to a broad and balanced education. You should be able to educate your children however you like, but it's not very easy, is it? They make it particularly difficult. And what you were saying about you don't have to track, one of the issues that I've come across with a lot of our home ed members is local policy, where you get a letter through saying we're coming to inspect you, coming to what you're doing, and actually they're not lawful visits. You don't have to accept visits, you don't have to evidence, do you, what you're actually doing, as long as, if there's an issue, then you might be asked to show that you're providing a use, what's the expression they use, a suitable education.
Yeah, suitable. I mean, it's good to perhaps write an education philosophy, just to say this is what we think we might be doing and we might be studying, so you're not pinned down to something. So that's a way to get round it if they're still hounding you and wanting something. So to write this education philosophy is a good way. I do know of an education authority that is threatening social services. So it's
if you refuse, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of it too.
Then you get a call to
so for people, of course. And I must admit, from my point of view, I don't know how I'd react. So I can sit here saying, we are under the parapet. We don't have any contact with the education authority, because actually we've moved in and the boys have never been in a state school in this borough. So therefore, technically, we don't have to inform them. Because last time we were here, they were in a private school, but they're not now. But I have to say, if social services were threatening me to come in and basically making out that I had something to hide, I think I probably would let them in, because obviously it's my children and I want to show them that everything was okay. But legally, they're not allowed to do that. And they're confusing welfare with education. And that's what's happening over and over again.
I mean, your home ed journey is, you're taking all of these images. So I will eat my desk if someone tells you that you're not providing a suitable education.
I know, it's kind of like, what more can you do?
Yeah, your images, the photos, albums on your curiosity-led learning page are amazing. The things that you do, I said to you earlier, my daughter, they're learning about the Tudors and they're learning about the Vikings, and she was bored. Like, they're sitting in class, whereas you're actually going out, you're doing discussions and all of the things that actually education should be, how it was, the autonomy. That was taken away, and sadly the creativity is being zapped out of the education system. And I personally feel at home education, I would love to home ed, and I did home ed my daughter for a few weeks, literally a few weeks, when my husband, he was taken ill and he couldn't drive, so we had to home educate, and we had planned to do it on an ongoing basis. And a place came up at a really good school around the corner, and we took it. And the reason I took it is what you said about unschooling, deschooling. I should have done that. I should have done that, because actually the reason I was like, I'm not doing this, was because it was so horrendous. My daughter's being assessed for autism at the moment, and auditory processing. She has Erlen. She had a dyslexia assessment last week, and all of these things. I literally took her out of school because we couldn't physically get her there anymore. And I ordered loads of stuff from Amazon, all of these books, coloured paper, all of this stuff, what I assumed you're supposed to do. And I sat there and I tried to teach her at home, and she just had meltdown after meltdown, because this is not how we do it. This isn't what they do at school. And it caused so many arguments and so much stress. I was just like, I cannot do this. And then a place came up at the school. And to be fair, at the time I was unwell myself with SPD pregnancy. So that's why we put her in school. But I would love to be able to home educate, to be in that position. But I mean, you were saying, when you do home educate, there are sacrifices that you do have to make yourself, because you have to pay for everything. So how have you found that side of it? Because as a teacher, I'm sure that working in education now anyway, it's extremely stressful. But how have you found that home educated is impacted on you as a family?
As a family, me personally, I ran a sewing business. So I was a sewing teacher, and I was a sewing teacher for 5 years, and it was all going great. And then suddenly we home edited, and we stopped. He came home in October, and then suddenly I couldn't work. So I lost my business literally overnight, because we moved back to where we are here as well, and I had to home educate. So that had a huge impact on me personally. Us as a family, the one thing I have learned is the parent doesn't home educate the child. One thing I've learned is that the family home educates. Everybody home educates. So the kids are asking Chris, my husband, oh, Daddy, what's this? As he's eating his breakfast, because they're so used to asking questions of anybody who they need to ask a question of now. So we're out and about on a trip, and they'll go, oh, can I just ask you this? And, they're so confident to ask people, I need to know, and you're going to help me tell me. So I lost that. We also lost that money. Because if you think about it, it's not impossible. I do know lots of single parents who home ed. I know lots of parents who work around each other. So one is at home with the children while the other one's out, and then he comes home and she goes out. And so there is that kind of sacrifice of a wage. Do you know what I mean? You can't have two full-time parents because they're in school for 6 hours. It's quite hard so that the financial restraints are a bit difficult sometimes. And actually, because we don't have to rush out and buy lots of resources, there's a lot online, but you do need to provide some stimulation. You can't just have bits of paper at a table, because otherwise that's just like school. So there is that. We put a lot of stock in our practical learning, so we do go out to visits, we do go out, and that costs money. So even getting to London to get to the free museum costs us money to get on the train or just me. So it's not free.
I was going to say as well, for anyone that is watching that is not yet home educating, I do know that there are, what's it called? If you contact a lot of venues, they have special pricing for home ed families. I know that when I've organised events in the past, and that they've asked, are you a home educator? Is it a home ed group? Because they will discount for a lot.
Lots of places are becoming really good. Like I was saying about the venues are suddenly sort of coming onto this. Also, the Albert Hall we're going to in a couple of weeks' time. That is part of the school's matinee, so it's a part of a school event that is open to home educators as well. And we went to the free event in the Albert Hall last year, the Big Bang Science event as well. That's open to school, so we're going along. That's free, and we're going along for the home educator tickets as well. So yeah, it's just about phoning up and getting on the phone and talking to people.
We took Tegan to the Big Bang show a couple of years ago. She was on the floor. They had like the ambulance, and they had all of the medical equipment, and she sat there doing CPR. She was in her element. So yeah, that's awesome. I have one question here. I'm just going to copy it across from my other screen. Oh wait a minute, it's a big one now. I'll pop it in the chat box and I'll read it out. So this lady's asking, I have a year 9 son who's severely dyslexic, dysgraphic, Erlen syndrome, slow working memory, plus sensory issues, plus traits of dyspraxia and anxiety. He's 4.5 years behind, hates school, plus now he's starting to refuse as he has daily punishments. She's thought about home education, but she works and hasn't got a clue how to start. No interested in learning anymore and no faith in teachers. Mentally, he's only about 8 to 9 years, very adolescent. Fantastic talk, thank you. Do you have any advice? I will say that this particular lady is a complete warrior. She's one of our founding academy members, but she has been tackling the EHCP and tribunal and just challenging it every step of the way, but it just seems that none of the support that's suggested is implemented, and it's lots of cases of isolation, detention and punishments without actually looking at
they're not treating the symptom, are they? They're just punishing what's happening, the behaviour.
Yeah.
So the question was, what
she doesn't know where to start. What would you
can she home ed? Is she able to home ed? That's the first thing I do, is think about it. Are you able to do that? Are you financially able to do that? And I don't mean that sounds very rude. She
does have her own business, I know that.
She does have her own. So is she able to work around? That's the only thing, because you don't need to give them 6 hours every day, because it's about doing it when the child is ready, if you see what I mean. So I don't do 6 hours of home edding every day. We do our maths, we do our science, we're beginning to do a bit more with English, and we do our learning in other ways, such as these trips out and collaborative learning workshops, things like that. You could do it on a Saturday, you could do it on a Sunday, you could do it in the evening. I know some families who get up very late, but they work very late in the evening, so you don't have to stick to the hours of 9 till 3. And I must admit, it took me a while to get out there, 9 till 3, Monday to Friday. Whoa, it's Saturday, it's the weekend. Actually, no, we just work whenever now, and we're much better at doing that.
That was one of the things that I learned as well from a lot of the families I spoke to. When you're like, okay, so I've got all of this stuff, I need to plan out what I'm going to cover. How many hours do I need to teach? And they're just like, the reaction you get, because everyone is so different. That's one thing I found with the home ed groups. Yes. Everyone is so different. Don't ever go in and suggest anything.
They have very strong opinions.
Yeah, exactly. And they have their own opinions. That's absolutely fine. But I was really surprised to hear that some of them were literally doing it a couple of hours. And if you think about an actual school day and break it down into what's done over the course of the day, when you are home educating, it's 1-on-1 or 1-on-2 or 3, depending on which time. I mean, you don't even have to work with all children at once. One could be off playing, and you could focus your attention, and you could squeeze in an entire day's learning.
Absolutely.
Actually a small window, and it's a lot more meaningful. They're going to take it in a lot more because it's more focused, whereas in a classroom setting where there's 30, 40 children, the background noise and everything else, that's why progress is not necessarily made. And do you know, one of the I'm not sure what the statistics are, but I know that home educated children actually quite often outperform children who are taught in mainstream schools.
I don't know the statistics, but I have heard that too. But one thing I have noticed, to go back to what you were saying, is that H would struggle in the class. He has struggled. He struggles with the noise. He struggles with the being able to work by himself. And the good thing about being able to sort of work 1 to 2 with him, because obviously I've got T as well, but he's fab. So if he struggles, I can see that he's struggling and I'm right there. He doesn't just have to sit as he would in a classroom and say nothing, because that would be him. And then I wouldn't go in as a parent looking at his books as you do. You get that, and then didn't finish. So I can kind of intervene exactly at the point that he's struggling before he completely loses the plot and shuts down, because that's what he used to. He used to completely just shut down. I can't do it. But now I can say, oh, I've noticed that's a little bit hard. Are you okay? And yes, he's not going to get that for the rest of his life, but actually at the moment he needs that. He was supposed to have a TA working with him, but he never got a TA. So he was assessed as needing one and needing something, I can't remember, about 4 or 5 hours with a TA, but never got that. So I just view it as, I'm not spoiling him, I'm not indulging him, I'm just giving him actually what the school assessed that he needed.
And you say he needed 4 to 5 hours. One of the things, because I've been preparing for this conference next week, I was talking to Sarah Gilly, who's one of our specialist teachers, and what we were talking about was actually the good use of TAs, because having a TA doesn't ensure progress. It doesn't guarantee that your child is going to be able to grasp the concept, because one of the issues, and they were saying about TAs don't add any real value, the report that came out, and that's why TAs are being ditched left, right and centre from schools because of the budget cuts. But actually it's not so much about the TA not adding value and not helping progress, it's about a complete lack of training, targeted support from TAs. Whereas as a parent, whether you are qualified to teach, whether you have a QTS, whether you've been to university or college or anywhere, actually what it is about is having an understanding of your child. And we all know that parents,
with their body language, aren't you?
Yeah, parents know their children best, and whether you've had a diagnosis or not, you can look at where the difficulties are and you can really target that intervention where it's needed, rather than just 4 or 5 hours of a TA sat next to him in class possibly doing the work for him. I'm not saying they all do that, but that's one of the criticisms, is that TAs aren't actually trained to deliver specialist intervention where it's needed, whereas you as a home educator, you can actually sit there and really, really get into the nitty-gritty of where his difficulties are. And there's no pressure there, is there? As you said, you don't need your child to be told that they're failing.
Yes, he knows he is, bless him. Yeah. He's not stupid. That's the thing with us dyslexics, or the dyslexic children. He knows. He knows he can't do it. He knows he can't write that number 8 or whatever.
But at the same time, he also knows it doesn't matter, because if he doesn't get it today, you can just work on it. Whereas if you're in education setting, you have all of your peers around you and all that pressure, SATs and things like this that are just completely, there's no benefit really to children sitting SATs. So I can imagine their confidence and self-esteem is a lot more intact than what it would be had they been.
H is proud to be H now. He will sit there and he'll say, I've got dyslexic, I don't mind, I'm dyslexic. And he'll say to people, I'm dyslexic. He's really proud, whereas his older brother took a lot longer, possibly because he was still in school. When he found out he was dyslexic, he said, do I have to tell anyone? Do I have to tell anyone? And I said, well, no, it's your secret to tell. I'm not going to tell anybody. But H is now, he's just very proud of himself. And bless him, T always thought he was awesome anyway. So he has been caught on quite a few times saying, I'm awesome. But going back to what I
was going to say, Simone, actually, she's just commented again saying, I struggle to even do the homework, which we don't do anymore. So how can I educate him to be able to leave school?
But homework is different, and homework is in a different setting. So he's done this stressful day at school, he's come home and he knows he's got to do more work. So homework is different from learning, from home educating. I mean, in that instance, what I would do is, if you were to take him out of school, I would literally take him out, de-school, let him sleep, let him heal. Don't expect him to do anything. Let him watch what he wants on the telly. He might stumble across a documentary that he might, oh, that's quite interesting. Take him out on trips. Just say we're going out for a walk. If he's interested in a tree or something, you could then think, okay, we might be able to do some learning on trees. I take him to museums. Almost treat it like a summer holiday. You know how we go out on trips for summer holidays? Oh, we're going to go on HMS Victory or something, I don't know. And
shake off all the stress. all the
Stay
drama.
with it, have fun, look for the learning things, look for things he's interested in. Is he interested in learning about, I don't know, rigging of ships? I don't know, something like that. And that's all I do with my guys, is I follow them and I look and see what they're interested in, and then I try and shoehorn learning. And if it's part of the curriculum, maths curriculum, I try and shoehorn it to fit that. If not, we just learn it anyway, because the curriculum is the curriculum, but who's to say that curriculum is the best curriculum? So your T is learning about the Tudors and whatever she's learning about, but who's not to say that actually learning about, I don't know, I can't even think of anything, but you know what I mean, the explorers is the right thing to learn.
Life, learning about life.
Learning about life. What are we learning? So, for example, history is a good thing, actually, because you're learning about the skills of historical inquiry. You don't have to know that through the Tudors, otherwise you failed. You're learning the skills of historical inquiry and chronology, and you can do that with any historical period. So just because my guys haven't done the Tudors because they haven't been in school doesn't mean to say that they haven't got those historical inquiry and chronology skills, because we've done it through something else, which I think is really cool, because the curriculum's quite narrow.
Do you know what I've found as well? I just think it's amazing. Quite a few of our members who do home ed, I know their children have their own little businesses, and I just think it's amazing.
Oh, fab!
Because they really do, not just, I'm slightly biased, I'm pro neurodivergence, but our brains are wired differently, and we have great entrepreneurial sparks in us, and having that freedom. And I always go on about the rap video. It's you're not supposed to say "God fire you, emu" guy, who's rapping about the education system and how learning the curriculum did not teach him life skills. And he's basically doing a comparison between what he was taught, like maths, when he should have been learning about paying mortgage, getting a job, paying bills, setting up a business, about our economy, about the law. You know, what are the laws? We talk about socialisation, and the education system is supposed to enable us to grow it, to be cohesive members of our society who contribute to our economy. They don't teach children how to think about these things. So,
no, we don't. And our education system hasn't evolved. I mean, again, it's like what he was saying. You look about the evolution of a mobile or a phone, and you look how it started and how it is now. And our education system, especially from that video, he's right. It starts with the Victorians, who wanted people to have a strong hierarchical setup in a school, that person was in power and you did exactly what they said, because what was going to happen, they were going to go into a factory, they were going to do the same job for the rest of their life with that hierarchical society, with somebody at the top saying, I'm in power, you do this. What we want for businesses now is thinkers, innovators. And actually this is where I think the neurodivergents are going to come into their own, because they're just kind of like, okay, I can't do it this way, I'm going to do it this way, which everyone kind of goes, really, I never thought of that, and it's fantastic. And actually home education allows that broad-minded thinking rather than that closed thinking.
I think it's amazing. I just need a clone to home educate T. I don't even have time to be me, never mind, like with Operation Diversity it makes it really difficult for me to be able to home educate, but I would love
absolutely. You've got a lot on your plate
to do it. So Simone, I hope that answered your question. I've met her son, and he is so amazing. We did the which I think it was a laser tag day in Derbyshire, and we're doing woodland laser tag, literally diving behind trees, and I think it was that day I lost my trainer in a bog, and then we did a workshop. I was literally commando rolling on the floor, and then after lunch we did a workshop on dyslexia, and just teaching about the positive aspects of strength. And I find it really difficult, because you could see some of the children there, not just this lady's son, but some of the other children there as well, they really lacked confidence, and it's just, you almost just want to scoop them all up and just make everything better, because they're in education for so long. And that was another thing I talked about earlier. It's a long time to be in education and not receive the support that you need.
Yes.
I think, it's damaging, and at home ed it gives people that option to actually do things on their own terms and to explore. And I just love the fact you don't have to follow the national curriculum. I know you can sign up for is it Inter High?
We're not quite there yet, but I don't know. You can sign up to lots, and there's lots of online learning programs that you can sign up to.
So you can do those and pay a fee to do them. I know Gwendolyn, our behaviour intervention specialist, she goes there, and I think she can get a discount for people go. And that's all well and great if you want to do the structured learning, or if you just want to focus and do structured for maths and English and science or something like that. But I love the fact that you can actually just choose what you do.
Yeah, it's really good. So this next month, I'm really looking forward to. I say looking forward to through gritted teeth. We're going to live on rations. So the kids, we've had to find out about the rations, what's available to us, and we've had to find out what we can have per week. We've found that in pounds and ounces. We've had to convert that into grams, and then we've had to multiply that by 5 to find out what we as a family are entitled to, and then trying to write recipes. And do you know what I mean? So it's just great.
So it's just like when you're going to be posting lots of photos of your powdered eggs.
I know. Yes, anybody knows this grey sludge. But yeah,
that's how you learn. That's brilliant.
It is totally. Even if it's you learning that you don't want to live on rations, at least you know that.
do you know what? I still remember learning about war and rations. My dad actually was still alive. He was alive during the war, and even now. In his 90s, loves to tell me about the Anderson shelter, hiding under the kitchen table, powdered eggs and all of that thing. And I do remember learning about it in school and making gas masks out of paper mache and all of the other bits that you do, your labels.
We did our Christmas last week. We did this air raid workshop, and Chris we had a delivery of Amazon things. So out of the big box, he made 2 little boxes and then covered them in brown paper and did a string thing, and they took them off with them. But you become quite, I was always, because as a teacher, you do get used to making resources out of nothing. So, but even Chris is now in on it, sort of like, I made some gas mask boxes. So yeah, it's brilliant. So like I said, we all home ed. It's not just, I home ed the children. We all home ed as a family, which is great.
Yeah. I love that you're planning activities and follow-up activities around the trips that you're making as well.
Yeah, for me, it's about the connections. It's about, I've learned with my guys that to tell them they need to experience it, they need to see it, feel it, touch it, hear it, all of that, sort of smell it sometimes, especially with age, bless them. I have to do all of that. And then come back and talk about it, and then you sort of solidified that, and then we're going to do something else with it, and then we're almost ready to create words and have a go at putting it down on paper. Should we need to? We don't have to. That's the thing as well.
Okay, so I have another question. This lady's asking, the difference since October has been amazing. Em has woken up, now has energy to ask questions. Most things start through art or music for us. We covered the Egyptians through making the River Nile.
Fantastic. That's the other thing. You can approach things from a different point of view, which is great. It's not just, here's a book, shush and listen while I talk, and then I want you to write, because that's evidence of learning, let's face it, for Ofsted. Why do we write in schools? A lot of what we write in schools is just to show that the child was in that lesson, and it's evidence to show an inspector that this is what they've learned. And we don't do a lot of that now, actually. But yeah, and actually the arts is I'm not in a school now, obviously, but the arts is being lost in schools. So to do things through arts and music, things that are very close to my heart is brilliant. And actually for our guys, sometimes that's a release, because they think sideways. They're great artists, they're great designers, they're great musicians, because that's the way their brains work.
Yeah, I think I've tried to remember this last time. I watched a video on social media a few weeks ago of a guy who was basically saying it's a completely waste of time to teach children things that machines can do. We need to actually be pushing the arts, focusing on the arts, and pushing all of the other stuff to the back.
Yes, that'd be lovely. There's so much research that shows that playing a musical instrument is amazing for our brain, because obviously we now have neuroscience. They put things on while people play violins and cellos or whatever. And the brain is just sort of fizzing away, because you've got the visual, so we're reading stuff, we've got the physical movement, we're doing stuff, and we've also got the auditory as well, so the brain is listening to what we're doing. Quite often we're playing away, no, I've got that wrong. Music is just amazing. It's amazing for its own sake, because it's great to play an instrument, but it's also great for brain development.
Yeah. So I think that those are the last questions we've got, unless anyone that's on the webinar has any other questions at all to ask Emma. There is a chat box at the bottom where you can ask your questions, or if you're following in the Facebook group, then just comment underneath the live feed. Okay. I'll ask you a question whilst we're waiting. What would you say is the biggest lesson that you have learnt as a home educator?
Oh, biggest lesson. Oh, that's a big question, isn't it? Oh, what have I, me personally?
Yeah.
What have I learned? I know to trust my children more. I was on a treadmill, and I fully admit this. I was a teacher. I trained to be a teacher. Teaching's great. School's great. Woohoo! I've got children. Right, children, onto the treadmill, and there we go. We're going to go to nursery. Blah 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 blah. And then I was looking at these children. I can see them going into school, into nursery, and then each year, like I said, each year it was just awful. And to be given this piece of paper at the end of each year to be told how awful my child was. You know, they're rubbish at writing, they're rubbish at this, they can't do that, you know. And actually looking at my poor child in front of me, who I should have seen it earlier, I think, should have done something early. I don't know. But maybe trust the children a bit more, that they will get there as well, and they don't have to get there in the traditional way. So I look at my elder son, and he's getting there. You know, he's dyslexic. He's writing the most amazing stories, which I would never have thought he would have done, let's face it. And there's me editing his work throughout half term for his English.
So do you use tech? I don't know, we did a webinar a few weeks ago with Microsoft on reading and writing tools. Have you ever tried, or did you even know that there's free stuff, free assistive technology on Microsoft devices, like text to speech?
Didn't know. No. Henry HG, he does use on his Apple, he texts his friends, but he speaks it. Sorry, that's terrible. He speaks and it writes it for him.
Yeah.
So he found that himself, actually, and he started to dictate a few other things. So I think that's where we're gonna go down that route with him.
I'll send you the video. It's actually on the Operation University YouTube channel, and available to everyone. So share it on your page. But there's things like, and honestly, I sat there, and I'm surprised loads of people are not running off after to try it out. But there's things where you can literally take a photo of a book, a poster, a menu, anything, and it will read and tell you what's on it. Yeah, there are so many things. You can change the font, you can change the spacing, you can change all sorts of things, and it's all free and available on Microsoft devices. And a lot of people know this, so access to assistive technology. But I'm just slightly off. The other thing I was going to say, I'll say it before I forget because I'm dyslexic as well, was that in terms of what you were saying about listening to your children more, one of the things that I find really, really hard to cope with, and one of the I'm dreading this talk on Tuesday because it's a government conference, and I know that I'm just going to burst into tears because I always do whenever I talk about what I do, the children that we support. And it's because a lot of organisations, schools, we all know that what's happening in schools, that children are being failed, and sadly it's almost as if you have to let them fail. And I've seen advocates recommend parents in support groups that, like, when they're looking at getting a private tutor, for example, a specialist assessor, and they said not yet, you have to wait if you don't want to give too much support outside of school, because then the schools think
you hit rock bottom, don't you, whatever that bottom is. But that's awful that they have to get down there before you can haul them back up again.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going to apply for an EHCP, the last thing you want to do, give intervention, but targeted intervention, specialist support can accelerate progress quite quickly.
Yeah, we found that.
Yeah. So what do you do? How have you found, because it is one thing home educating, and there are thousands of families that just home educate, and then there's people that have children with SEND or neurodivergent differences. How have you found that different? Because obviously you're working, you know your children best, you know what the difficulties are, but how do you get around that? Like, because in the academy we're obviously doing specialist sessions to teach them about different aspects of disability, but how did you find that to start with, learning about dyspraxia and autism and all of these other?
I found you. We've had a couple of conversations. There was a point where I was, I don't know, because I'm not dyslexic myself. I have traits, but I'm not dyslexic. My father's dyslexic, so I've had experience of a member of the family. I mean, he would cover it up very well, like he can't tell the time, but he would say, I'm just not going to wear a watch. And he would say, which bit does F come in the dictionary? Because he loves doing so. He'd had strategies to get us to do things for him. I was going
to say, ask someone else. That's a good.
Exactly. So I had kind of experience with that. But to be honest, from teaching, I've taught quite a few dyslexic children, and I learned pretty early on that if you mentioned it to your head teacher, they weren't interested. And it was kind of, in my first year of teaching, I had a boy in year 4 who literally couldn't read, and I kept saying, but he's really bright. When you talk to him, he's verbally able. I just don't get why he can't read. And he was had these sort of very basic books, and I was told, oh well, you're an NQT, you're very enthusiastic and want to probably diagnose everybody, and it's absolutely fine. And they basically told me to go away. So I ended up,
great if they did.
Yeah, and I thought, how did he get to year 4 and no one say anything? In fact, he couldn't read at that point. So I went to the nursery teacher and got the phonics assessment, and then I did the phonics assessment with him, produced evidence, then went to the head teacher and went, hello, he is, there's something here. I couldn't name it because I didn't know what it was. But going back to that, I did a lot of reading, a lot of researching. I bought books, and because that's the kind of person I was anyway. When I was a teacher, if I had a child that couldn't do something that interested me, it kind of ignited my, rather than ignoring it. They're the children I love. And I ended up going and working in a school that I had 17 children in my class, but each one had huge problems because the school was failing and they wanted to shut it down, and all of the other children had left. So we were just left with these aggressive children who were just trying to kill each other, bless them. And that's kind of followed me through with my own children, trying to, well, why can't you run like your friend who's the same age? Why do you do this with your arms? Why can't you hold your head as a baby, but your brother did? So I've always been very aware and very interested in children and how the difficulties they have. And I think that's just sort of followed me through. So how I found out about it is just by reading, just constantly reading. There's a lot of material out there. I would say, I don't know, not to put words into your mouth, there's quite a lot, probably not very good quality material out there, but there is quite a lot of material out there that you can read.
Yeah.
And it's just finding why having teaching experience, having a broad experience of children helps to know what's age appropriate. I think I'm pretty good up to year 6. Year 7, haven't got a clue. I have no idea at all. And I bring one of that scares me. So the boys want to go back into school, and I have to say I'm quite smiley about that because the idea of teaching GCSEs. But as Chris said, my husband, he said you will get there because you just have to be. It's like anything with teaching, you just have to be one step ahead.
Well, there's a way you don't need to know everything. You just need to be able to know the next bit.
Exactly. And also, the one thing I have learned about myself is that now, when it comes to the kids, I will find out, I will learn, I will do it. So it frightens me, GCSEs, but actually I know I do it because I'm quite, it's like your hashtag that parent, isn't it? I will do it because they need it, and who else is going to do it for them?
That's amazing. Thank you very much. And an awesome way to end our session as well. Hashtag that parent indeed.
That parent, yeah.
Thank you very much. I cannot even thank you enough. It really, really was great of you to give us your time and to give us insight into your home ed journey.
Oh.
So I wish you all the best, and I will look forward to seeing your the rest of your home ed journey unfold.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Good night, everybody. If you have any questions, Emma is in the group, so you can tag her maybe, or follow her Facebook page. It's just at Curiosity Led, isn't it?
Yeah, Curiosity Led Learning.
Yeah. And that's it. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks, Emma.
Bye.